because this microphone doesn't amplify it. This is our Meet the Candidates night. We have, I'm the chair and member of the nominating committee, which basically helps oversee the election. There are two people on that. Neither one can make it tonight due to various issues. Deb Putt, who's the chair of the legal committee, and David Bernhardt, who's also on the legal committee. And the legal committee has sort of undertaken the role of sort of supervising the election process. We have three candidates here. Mike Bernhardt, Nina Boone, Jessica Charters. There's one seat that's available. It's a 3-year term. The election starts tomorrow online. The third. Okay, so you vote. The best way is to vote online. We do have, as far as the voting process, it ends on the day of our annual meeting, which is November 1st, which is going to be at Independence. Not here, but that's where we've had it, always had it in the before. And the procedure is, these are the three candidates, but someone could submit a petition with a certain enough signatures to get on the ballot. And according to our rules, someone can nominate themselves or be nominated at the floor at the annual meeting. Of course, we hope that everyone votes before then, so that, because it's important that we establish a quorum. We need to have a certain number of votes cast in order for the election to be official. All right. As far as tonight goes, the procedure is each candidate is going to make a opening statement not to exceed 3 minutes. We'll open the floor to questions. We have some questions up here in case, to get things started, but we ask everyone ask whatever questions, and we're going to give each candidate up to 2 minutes to respond. And at the end, there'll be a 2-minute closing argument, or going back to my legal days. Closing statement. Your Honor, I object. Barry is our tech guru. We're Zooming this. Do we have anybody on Zoom?
I have 18 people. I'm letting number 19 in right now.
Okay. So Barry, for people who ask questions in the field, do they need to come up, or are they okay in their seat? Okay. So, but again, this microphone is not for us. It's for the people that's on the Zoom. Okay.
Of you on Zoom, if you have any questions, feel free to type them into the chat. If you would prefer to be unmuted, you can use the reaction to raise your hand, and we will unmute you to ask a question.
Okay. So, Mike, you're up first for your opening statement.
Thank you. Thank you. And thank you all for coming out on this beautiful fall evening. Appreciate it. If I were sitting out where you are right now, I'd be asking a couple of questions before I determined who I would like to represent me as your homeowner representative on the PCA board. One, who has the historical perspective, who has seen the peninsula grow from 300 to 400 homes to now well over 1,100 homes? Who understands how we have grown and how we have survived and how we have been able to maintain the quality of our vision statement? We are an upscale, prime, secured, 24-hour gated community. Question two, who is involved in getting homeowners involved by being one of the early participants in the committee structure within our community? We've had now well over 100 homeowners like yourselves who have participated over the last couple of years in infrastructure, in finance, in landscape, in security, all of the issues that we deal with daily. Homeowners have evolved into making policy directions as guiding the board. Question three, we're going to see a significant change in governance over the next year. We're going to see a transfer of basic majority on the board from Ocean Atlantic to homeowners. who has spent the last couple of years working diligently, cooperatively, and collectively with Ocean Atlantic in reading the bylaws, in reading the declarations, in doing what is necessary to help protect all of us as homeowners as we transition into this new governance responsibility. Well, we've been here over 10 years. My wife, Ann, actually we're a twofer. Ann has been involved in doing the Green Up Day, in Communications Committee, and various others. And I have spent the last 3 years working very diligently with Merrill in reading those bylaws and declarations to ensure your safety as we make this transition. I was also one of the early members of the Finance Committee and helped evolve the entire committee structure, which is a homeowner operation. All of a sudden, now you can't tell time.
I should start early and get go. Good evening. So, Mike, thanks for all that. And again, thanks for your service. The catalyst for me wanting to be considered for this open position is this. It's a little bit the opposite of what Mike talked about. When I look at the board today, we've got an incredible richness of history and knowledge and long-term residency here at the Peninsula. That will continue. What we don't have is someone who represents some of the newer residents. And so as someone who is in one of the newer communities in the last few years, 18th on the Bay, I am part of the townhomes and I know the custom homes. We don't have, our representative is the PCA. We don't have one of the 9, I think it's 8 or 9 neighborhood boards that stand for them. And there are 6 other communities within the Peninsula that the PCA stands for as well, without their own individual board. How do we take, when you look historically, if you've taken the opportunity to look at the archives that Dev put up, when I look at the commitment and the work that was done by the folks in this community to bring us to what we all felt as new residents when we drove through the gates for the first time, that commitment and dedication of time and effort will have to continue for us to continue to have this community as we drive through the gate. We are at a time of transformation. There's no doubt about that. I have worked through the transformation on a board with a co-op in New York City with an owner that sat on the board that sometimes had very different views than we did. But in the end, we came together for the growth of the community and the good, not only business sense of the community, because in the end, this is a business, but it's also a group of humans that live together collectively. And so I believe that I can bring a fresh perspective. I will also tell you this, is that when you've been somewhere for a long time, and I felt this when I was, because I was co-op president for 4 years, my ear was not as sharp on the last day of my presidency as it was on the first day of my presidency. Getting stuck in the elevator with some of our residents was difficult for me at the end. And so what happens is that my ear is fine-tuned because I'm relatively new. I want to hear all the things that are challenging you, but in order to do that, I'm also going to ask you to lean in for all the things that you love and how can we build on that? Okay. So that's the thing. I mean, we're an evolving community. We've got more full-time people now than ever before. We have more people on the ground than ever before. How do we bring their voices into the board? And I believe I can do that. So I appreciate it.
Thank you. Ready?
Ready?
Okay, Jessica,
Okay.
you're up.
Good evening, everybody. Thank you for coming, and thank you, Mike and Nina, for setting that up. My name is Jessica Charters. I have lived in the community for 6 years. I currently serve as the vice president for the Marina Bay Townhouse Condominium Association, so I'm very familiar with how the community works and the interactions between the sub-associations and the master. I've been in mortgage and real estate for about 30 years, so I'm also very familiar with how condominium and master associations work in general. I think there are some great opportunities here for the future for the Peninsula. Some of those, I break them down into 2 categories, basically administrative and expectations.
For the administrative, I see some great opportunities with the hub. I think it would be great if residents had an insight into the ticketing system so that we could see what tickets are out there. I think it would be great if we had a project tracker and we could see what those projects are that, everybody is working on. I think there are some opportunities with Dwelling Live. I think there's some opportunities with the front gate, a procedural review for the front gate. I think the text messaging service that we have, it could be utilized a little more effectively in getting immediate information out to the residents. As far as expectations go, I think there's two sides of this. You as residents, or all of us as residents, have an expectation that the board is going to be accountable to you. On the other side, the board has an expectation as residents that you're going to follow the rules, and that I would encourage a high level of participation from the residents. Volunteer for communities, committees, get involved, come to meetings. That is where your feedback is noticed. That is where you make changes, and that is what I would encourage everybody to do. That's what I have for you this evening, and I welcome your questions and look forward to answering those and hope to be serving you in the future.
We got another minute left. Thank you. Thank you all. So we're going to open up the questions to the floor. I have a few prepared questions that the committee had put together, which I'm happy to start with to get the ball rolling. Nina, you're first to answer, then everybody get it. We'll give everybody 2 minutes. So first question is, what is your understanding of the PCA's primary objectives, and how do you see the role of the board in formulating or helping with that objective? No.
Love a microphone. The way I see the PCA board and the way the board has functioned, and again, I can't imagine it's a lot different, but correct me, is that we are here to serve the community. So this is not a be in charge. This is a serving. This is in my mind, this is a position of service. And so, but at the same time, it is a body that has to listen to the residents that are here, but that also has to help create rules and regulations, and as Mike talked about, bylaws and things like that, that help the business run, because it is in fact a business. It also has to keep track with, with today and tomorrow and every day thereafter, but while honoring again the history that we have, because there is much learned that needs to be incorporated into the way the board runs today. It is an organization that is fed now, to Mike and Meryl's point, both about 100 folks that work on committees, which is not totally new, but relatively new. So, and the volunteer aspect of this is amazing in this community, that so many people are involved. So how are those committees feeding in, and how is that information being utilized? We should be hearing that and utilizing that in conjunction, obviously, with conversations with Ocean Atlantic, because they sit with 3 to 2. But it is our primary purpose is to make sure that this community functions from a business perspective, but also from a humanistic perspective, that we can live here collaboratively and collectively in relative peace, not every single day, but relative peace. So, but again, running the business, and again, running our human factor as well.
Okay, I see the role of the board and the role in the neighborhood is maintaining the high standards that we all expect living here. And as I mentioned, that is a collaborative process. We're all residents. We're all volunteering for this. We're just your voice. So we should be your voice. But we also have to have our own ear to the ground and address things that we see out in the community. And there needs to be a functional way for us to do that. As I said, I would encourage participation from the residents. And I've been through this transition before. I was on the transition with the Marina Bay Townhouse Condominium Association, so I'm familiar with that process. And I've learned a lot from being involved in that. And I think my experience is very beneficial to continuing the future and maintaining those high standards for our residents.
Thank you, Mike. And for all of you, if anyone needs me to repeat the question,
Why did you wait to ask me that? See, we have worked so closely together. No, that's your time. Yeah, I've watched our community evolve from a top-down decision-making to a bottom-up policy directive type of governance. I've also seen us grow from $1 million or so of budget to this year close to $5 million in general operating expenses, over $3 million in reserve funds. We're dealing with $8 million in a very solvent governance, thanks to the board, who's looked at some responsibilities in a couple of ways. One, a board has to submerge its parochialism. I do not live in Marina Bay. I live in the Peninsula. That is a primary responsibility of a board member. The other is something that we invoked in the very first meeting of the Finance Committee. Nothing should be done that would require unbudgeted, mandated expenses or special assessments. That is a primary responsibility of your board, to protect your dues, protect the community's stability, listen to its people, but see the overall picture and the overall community responsibility. Is that an add-on, or is that no? Okay. So there is a significant responsibility. Listen to the community. Listen to what the committees are saying in the way of policy direction, but be prepared to make very hard and difficult decisions. Your clock.
They all finished it well under. Okay. So,
Where's Ann? Did she agree with that?
all right. So I'm going to ask one more question. All of you have I think voiced the opinion that it's important to listen to the homeowners. Unfortunately, the homeowners don't speak in one voice. And so some things that certain homeowners want, others are against. How do you address that difference? And particularly the question is, are you comfortable making and supporting decisions that may be unpopular with certain groups within the community?
I'm first. Ready? Oh. So yes, I am very comfortable making those decisions. My day-to-day work requires me to make those types of decisions. My existing service requires me to make those types of decisions. And I think the best you can do is find middle ground where you try to make the majority of the people happy. You're never going to make everyone happy. And I wish that were possible. And I also think we need to make sure we're addressing the big rocks and not, every little issue that comes up, we're addressing those big things. That's what I think we need to focus on. What is the majority of the community concerned with? Is it security? Is it the appearance? What are those factors? And as I mentioned, the best way to do that is to get feedback through the hub, with participation in our meetings. That's what I would want to see, and that's how I would plan to address those items.
Thank you.
Nina, is it you? Mike?
You got your speedy clock on again? Okay. We have a community of well over 2,000 people. There are more people living in the Peninsula today than lived in my town in Vermont before we moved here. So I'm used to people and communities this size. When you elect somebody, do you elect them to parrot your views, or do you elect them because you feel they have the ability to think through problems, to take a consensus of the general population, and then make a decision in what they feel is in the best interest of the community, the entire community, not a subset, not an individual? But the responsibility is to look out for those over 2,000 people. When you make decisions like that, you're going to get somebody upset with you. And that's why for the years that I've served, I have an email address of Mike Bernhardt, PCA @gmail. That mailbox can be flooded at times with people who have disagreed with a decision. But that's the responsibility of a board member. Look at the overall. Look at what is in general responsibility for the people in your community and make a decision. And if you make too many wrong decisions, I will not be sitting here 3 years from now.
Thank you. I have more questions, but I want to open it up to the floor rather than.
Do I-
comments.
do I- do I-
Oh, I'm sorry.
Am I invisible? Is that, do I have to talk about invisibility?
Meryl, there's a question. Let's start. There's a question on the chat.
Yeah.
Oh, not yet. This is the thing. Most of you have been in leadership positions. We make decisions every day that there's somebody who's not going to agree with. What I tend to find is this: when you listen to people, when you help them understand the facts and why you're making the decision you are, many a time, the answer still comes back, I don't agree with you, but they can respect the fact that you're making the decision. When I was on the board in New York, we had 16 floors in our building. What we started doing when I took over as president was on a quarterly basis, meeting with the people on each one of those floors. And what we found out is that the experience on one floor was very different than the experience on another. People had children, people had elderly people, we had a hoarding situation, we had all kinds of stuff going on floors that people were dealing with. I don't know that we changed a whole lot of our community rules because of it, but our community felt like we heard them and that we understood that the hoarder next door was difficult and that we understood that the children above them with the overrun tub is impossible. That's what we have to do here. How do we go out and maybe meet with people in the community? And a lot of times you don't want to hear from them because they always have a challenge. What I'm going to do is for every challenge, what is an idea for a solution? Because if the board is the only smart people in the community, then we're not winning. You have to find a way to hear everyone, to educate people, and to help them understand why the decision was made. Am I done? Okay. So I've learned that from leadership and from leading very large teams and incredibly entitled sales teams, that decisions are difficult. But these two are right. We have to think about the community at large. I will also say this: communication is key. Our communication team does a great job. I've literally worked with companies who have communicated in every way, shape, or form, including talking to them during a performance review about certain issues, and they don't even remember that they talked to them about that. So we have to go back and talk to them and hear people. Okay.
First, anybody in the room? Anybody in the room have a question? So you're going to need the microphone.
Oh, we can
Oh,
tag team.
whose turn is it to go?
Mike.
Hi, everyone. It's good to meet you.
You have to speak louder and move closer because I can't hear.
Okay. Hi, it's good to meet you. I'm wondering about your stance on speeding in the community and how we can alleviate that. I appreciate that there was a recent email sometime around the summer that said, take a photo of the license plate and send it to the gatehouse. But if somebody's speeding, we often don't have the moment to actually pull out our phone and take a photo. So what are some solutions or things that you think we could do to address that problem?
You just state for the record, just tell us your name.
Melissa Chapman, and I live in Marina Bay.
I'm so sorry. And if I can just jump in to say that Steve Royce is also on chat asking a very similar question.
Melissa, I think that the gentleman sitting behind you, Mike Bivens, who's the chair of the security committee, I have a hunch he put you up to that one. You are absolutely right. Thanks to our security committee, a year or so ago, we installed a speed monitor sign. Did it slow traffic down? When you could see the sign. Does it take photographs? Not yet. Can it take photographs? Yes. once the decision is made, how we can properly enforce it. Those are the issues that surround the speeding. One thing Mike and his committee have been able to determine, it's not renters who speed. It's not truck drivers who speed. Judging from the times of day and the traffic counts going, it's your neighbor who is speeding. And at this particular point, I drive 23 miles an hour. I get a lot of angry people behind me. I'm still trying to figure out what a central digit means in your hand, but it's a new way of waving, I think. It's a problem. We're well aware of it, Melissa, and you're absolutely right. Somehow, someday, hopefully before we have a major injury, we're going to get our community to slow down. I have no magic bullet for you.
It's interesting. I mean, I have yet to find anybody who follows a rule unless there's consequences if it's something like this. And I agree with Mike. I think the safety of our community is there. I'm guilty of it myself. And in the neighborhoods, it's 15 miles an hour, right? So do you put in speed bumps? That's an option, and many communities have opted for that because it is the only way that they've been able to do it. I don't know if we have the authority to ticket people. If we do take pictures, it would be Joe and the security committee that would tell us whether or not we had the option to do that. But that's what it would take. But before we would do that, really solid conversations again, and I believe out in the communities talking about the fact that something has to change or something has to change. Right. So that's where our evolution as a community has to come in. Because I agree. I think with the kids on bikes, and especially in the summer, and we've got skateboards and we have strollers and we have all kinds of things in this community because it's not a retirement community. We're going to have to find a way to keep the community safe. I think a conversation with our neighbors face to face and in groups would help that. But then I think other stronger measures would have to be taken.
Thank you. I don't think anyone in this room is going to disagree that speeding is an issue. I just don't think you're going to find anybody. But as you've heard, there are challenges to that, and you have to be, number one, mindful of spending. I mean, we could go out and put cameras up everywhere, but that's probably going to be really expensive. And I know the board has considered multiple solutions, including the speed bumps, which, quite frankly, they slow somebody down for 12 inches and then they speed up again. And this is not a Peninsula problem. This comes in. People who are speeding don't just come into the Peninsula and start speeding. But you also have a challenge with enforcement because there's no law enforcement within the Peninsula. No one is getting a ticket or going to court or going to jail because they're speeding here. There's an enforcement process. It's required by our governing documents. It's required by the state of Delaware. You give them a notice, they get a second chance, they get a hearing, and then it goes to fines. And those fines are now pretty substantial. The thing is, they have to get caught. What's the first thing? I mean, as a resident, what's the first thing you're going to ask for if somebody says you were speeding? You're going to want proof. How do we do that? So I think there's a balance somewhere, and finding that is a challenge. And it's been a very long standing challenge for the existing board, and it's going to be a challenge for all of us. We need community participation to solve that.
Thank you.
To Jack.
I think it's not.
Thank you. Jack Bardall, live in the veranda, been a homeowner here for 11 years. I'd like to know each of your positions on short-term rentals. We revised it 2 years ago when we had a summer that turned into pretty, there were a lot of problems with short-term rentals. Do you support moving to a short-term rental policy that requires a 30-day rental period?
To be honest with you, I would have to look at how many people are enjoying rentals shorter than that. 60 homes rented shorter than that. See, this is where, again, I mean, it's like, what was their belief and knowledge when they moved into the community and what their rights were? What are the rights today? But again, how do we continue to create an environment that all of us can live in with a group of short-term renters. So I can't imagine this has not been talked about on the board. So for me to not know all of that would be disingenuous to say what I believe, but I do believe it has to be considered because you've got people who are renting their properties and thought they could when they moved in. So it would be a big change. So how do we accommodate that? So.
Has not supported it.
Yeah.
Jack, let her answer the question. You can debate her.
Yeah. 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 So I figured it had. So, but my concern would be to understand what the issue is with the short-term rentals and how can we alleviate that because you've got people who've come in. But other than that, I don't know what the discussions were at the board. So.
Ready? I think it's mine. Jack, thank you for that question. I happen to have a response because we experienced an issue on our street this year where we had a group rent 8 different homes. And I was here when the vote went through to change the rental rules. And I don't necessarily think it's fair to owners who bought in here thinking they could rent. But what I do think, recently, the Architectural Control Committee, they put in a procedure in place where you have to go to your neighbor and say, I want to paint my door. Are you okay with this? I don't see any reason why, as a person renting your home, you don't have to go to your neighbors and say, I'm renting my home. Here's the phone number you call at 1 a.m. when you're getting disturbed and I'm sleeping in my bed at home. So I don't think that's an unreasonable request, is to notify the homeowners around you. I'm renting my property, but this is how I address the issues. Either provide a local contact or rent it through an agency, one or the other. But that homeowner needs to take responsibility for renting that home.
Jack, I was part of the board when we made the change and reached out to the community to change from a minimum 3-day rental to a 7-day rental in season. I expressed my views at that point, knowing that there were a number of homeowners who made investments at the time. But the demographics of our community has changed dramatically since its inception. We are now a more full-time permanent residential community. I also went on record at that time as favoring a minimum 30-day rental period, no more than 3 times a year. That's still my philosophy on rentals. And that's still would be on the table as that issue evolves and arises again.
Only people in the back, huh?
Me.
My name's Joe Shuttleworth. My wife and I live in the veranda. Sorry, I'll speak up. So outside of the transition, with OA transitioning and more homeowners on the board, can you give me 2 or 3 specific things that are going to come up that you think we need to pay attention to in the next 3 years, if that's the term you're running for? And try to be more specific, generic. Well, the economy could, don't please, I mean, you can answer it that way, but I'm looking for somebody to say, we've got this kind of impact that's going to happen in the community, I think, in the next 3 years. And unless you're a prognosticator and can tell me who's going to win the World Series, you know, I'm not going to hold a wrong answer against you, but I'm just curious what, yeah.
Some of us know the answer to that question about the baseball, but
I did, yeah. So as far as the transition goes, I think there's one very important thing, and honestly, I don't recall it being addressed so far, and that is ensuring that we do have a transition study. And it's not that I don't trust OA, but I think we owe it to the homeowners to make sure that what is supposed to be done is done. So that should be probably put in place. The other thing that I am not sure that we have is a disaster recovery or business continuity plan. And those are some things that we probably need to address. I mean, we just saw what happened in North Carolina. If something similar happened here, what do we do? Do we have a plan for the community? So those would probably be my top 2 things that we need to address as homeowners going forward.
Where do you want me to start? One, finances. As a community over the past years, we have enjoyed significant revenues offsetting your dues coming from new home and resale sales, predominantly new home sales. Those are going away. That's going to mean the difference in hundreds of thousands of dollars in revenue to this community. How do we address it? Do we address it by cutting back on spending? Do we transfer the responsibility of increased dues dramatically? Remember, I mentioned no special assessments. That is a looming financial issue. If the dues go too high, there are people within the community who cannot remain here. Will their homes go up for sale? Will that depress the home values within the community? There's a balance in how we must maintain the fiscal responsibility in our community. That I see as a looming issue. That's a no. As far as the others, the good Lord can do anything. Are we prepared? To some extent, yes. We have well over $3 million in our reserve fund ready to address catastrophic damage. Are we insured? Yes, within the reasons of affordability. My God, can I go on? Do you get a sense? Do you get a sense? There are specific areas of concern. There are specific areas that have evolved over the years. And those are the types of things that have kept me awake at night.
It's a great question and a good one. The finances are always going to be front and center, but that needs to have a comprehensive view. I agree that the glut of homes that are being sold right now and the money coming in is going to slow down. Will it go away? No, there will be turnover, and there's probably some sort of systemic chaos to the chaos of turnover. So being able to predict that. If you haven't seen the audit in terms of our infrastructure and the way they have paced out how to pay for that infrastructure, amazingly done. So that has to be taken into consideration. There is no doubt, if any of us living here do not believe that our dues will go up, that's an unrealistic expectation. So how much, though, the board will in fact be able to pace. We should be able to give some sort of line of sight to that. There's no doubt. So that's a big one, and it always is. The second one is to Jessica's point about disaster recovery, but also what is going on outside our gates that will affect us inside the gates. And someone raised the question of the wind turbines or the wind farm that's going on. Those are one of those things that we don't know a lot about. Maybe we need to know more about it. So I think there's some things going on outside the community that we need to bring a speaker in and an expert in so that we can know. I think the board maybe vets them first, but I think we need to know more about what's going on outside that will affect us inside, because I do believe there are things that's going to happen. Okay, those are my two.
Before we get to the next question, I got a question. Being on the board involves a lot of time. Specifically, we go to various committee meetings a couple times a week. Could be a couple hours at a time. We have regular board meetings. We have going out into the community to see problems and issues, plus the quarterly meetings and the annual meetings. Is there anything that would be a problem for you to be able to devote the kind of time and energy or the time necessary to perform those duties? Whose turn is it? You were in charge.
I think it's Mike went first. Did you go first? I think it's your turn.
Fine. What if he told me?
That's the question.
Yes. Just so it's a heads up, time allocation. It's been wonderful. I'm still working and serving on the board. But I did include in this year's budget a request for 100% increase in board compensation.
Zero.
So, it's truly a labor of love being on the board. And is the time allocation heavy at some points? Yes. as I mentioned earlier, does my email box fill up very quickly sometimes? Yes, but everybody gets a response. I have planned my next 3 years to continue working the way I am, to keep traveling with my lovely wife, and to still devote the 120% time to the board as I have done.
I think if we hadn't considered the time, then I don't think we would all be up here. So again, I still work full time too. I work at home. I travel very little for work now, which is terrific. So again, calendars fill up with meetings and things like that. So you have to be available to the community. Again, I would push actually for more time in the community, and I would like to be able to spend that more face-to-face time with with our neighborhoods. So I would add that on top of that as well. So no problem. No, no raise. We're just telling him about the findings. We can't support a raise.
So also not a challenge for me. I happen to be self-employed right now and have a very flexible schedule, so I'm able to maintain that. And for anyone who read my bio, I've managed my time with multiple commitments for a very long time. I worked full-time and went to college full-time. I took 12 credits and worked full-time. So I'm used to managing that and balancing my schedule. And I live here full-time as well, which I think we all do. So that, you know, makes it a little bit easier. I'm not traveling in from out of town, and I don't really travel for work. I work here. So it's not an issue for me at all.
Question from in the back, Barry.
Before I go to Barry, do we have anybody on chat?
I think it's mine, maybe.
Hi, Barry Wetcher. I live in Stillwater. I've lived here for about a year now. Merrill, there's actually a quick question for you. Is the board just consist of 2 of you?
So there's 2 homeowners and 3 Ocean
Right.
employees. It's a 5-member board.
So here's my question to the candidates. Do you guys foresee expanding the board, since there's just going to be 2 of you, and that's really kind of minimal when you're representing over 1,000 homes? Do you foresee expanding the board?
So when the transition happens to homeowner control, I believe our documents call for 5 or 7 homeowner members. So it's based on the documents. Our governing documents say what's there. And if I recall correctly, Ocean Atlantic has the opportunity to maintain 1 person on the board to serve and represent their interests. So that's governed by, or that's managed by our governing documents.
You have a different answer. No. You got a comment? He's going to comment. He wants to comment.
Jessica is absolutely right. So, there is some question, and it is under discussion, that as we review documents, does it make sense to maintain a 5-member board with 1 seat controlled by Ocean Atlantic for a little better continuity, and then perhaps 3 to 5 years out, when things have stabilized, build to a 7-member board with 6 homeowners and 1 for Ocean Atlantic? It's up for question, but it will ultimately be decided before any formal turnover and after a lot of input from the homeowners.
I think too, I mean, again, the documents will rule that as it evolves, but also with the committees that have been started, so many homeowners are involved now with the board that it is not just 2 people sitting. So it is the entire community that has opportunity.
Good answers. I'll be available if anybody has questions, some specific things that may not have been, addressed or answered. I'm happy to talk about, and I can give you some more information about some of these topics. Anyway, Veronica, who's next? Yeah.
Hi, Kathy Melfi from the Conservancy. We've been here 7 years. This question is somewhat relevant to what you were talking about as far as the majority on the board skewing to Ocean Atlantic. I had heard a rumor recently, and I hope it's a rumor, that Ocean Atlantic, there are still, I believe, around, and you could correct me, board members, 40 lots that are still owned by Ocean Atlantic, and that during the board election, they get to vote for those 40 or however many homes, they get a vote. Is that true?
Can I answer that? The answer, I don't know if it's 40, but yes, they vote, they can vote. However, the practice has always been that they don't vote for a candidate, they vote for quorum purposes. So everyone who owns a lot can vote. We need a certain percentage, 51% of all the lots, including the ones that are owned by the different developers that haven't been sold, to vote. And so what we've always done in the past, and the commitment from all of our developers, they will vote their lots for quorum purposes only, not for a specific candidate. That way we're ensured that we get enough votes so the election is official, but they don't get involved and interfere with the actual election.
I believe those 40 lots are owned by Shell, not Ocean Atlantic.
Right.
Okay.
But Veronica,
So to clarify, they do not vote for any one of these
No.
candidates.
Veronica can attest to that.
Reach out to all three. Shell is the declarant in Stillwaters, was the declarant in Southside Villa, Ocean Atlantic, obviously, of the lots, and Insight and Conservancy and Veranda. We reach out to all of them, ask them to complete a proxy without voting so that they are in attendance. Tom's presence at the meeting counts as attendance to however many lots they own that year, but they, as practice, have agreed not to vote in any of our elections.
And just to clarify, I think we officially have 1,404 lots. Even though we're not going to actually have 14, so we need 702 to vote for quorum purposes. So, and without those people, those developers voting, we may not get that number of votes. So that's why that's done.
Jack Clune in Marina Bay. In this transition, I don't know the answer to this question. Does Ocean Atlantic own the clubhouse? And in transition, will they continue to own it? So they're in charge and they will be responsible for the management of the clubhouse and this.
Is it really? Yeah, it's not really a candidate question. So the answer is the club is separate from the PCA. Ocean Atlantic clubs, whether they turn over the PCA, which is us, has nothing to do with their ownership interest in the club. And just to be clear, under our documents, the club pays dues for equal to 10 lots, and they're entitled to 1 seat on the board, even when homeowners take over. So technically, it's not Ocean Atlantic that would have a seat on the board. It's the club. But since Ocean Atlantic owns the club, presumably it'll be a representative of Ocean Atlantic that's on the board. Then another owner of the club would be entitled to have a member on the PCA board.
Thank you. First, I just want to say, I'm Kathy Andonian. I live 18th on the Bay. I'm thrilled that we have 3 people running for the board. It's a sign of a very vital, it's a vital community. It's a vital community when we have so many people willing to give of their time and talent to the community. I do have one question. All of you have mentioned how important it is to listen to the community, particularly as we move through this time of transition. Times of great change bring with it great anxiety. And I'm wondering how each of you might find some new and different ways of reaching out and listening to the community as we're moving forward in this transition.
Great question, and such a good one, and relevant to what's going on. Again, we're evolving as a community, and so we're growing like crazy with 2 new neighborhoods, and those are filling up quickly. And again, Kathy, to your point, I mean, I remember how we felt on 18th on the Bay when we were new, and our community felt not integrated. So I would go with my standard, which is weirdly enough, meeting with people face to face. I tend to find they can formulate questions better, they can challenge each other, they can bounce ideas off of each other, and we really hear people that way. So I mean, I would take the time to listen to not only the HOA representatives within our communities, but also the communities themselves. Will that take a lot of time? Yeah, but if people are willing to come to those meetings and voice what they're thinking and feeling about the turnover as well as the future of the community, then I'm happy to spend that time. So that would be my offer to do that.
Thank you. I also feel that it's very important to get the sub-association boards involved a little more. I'm on one of those right now, so it would be great if I would advocate for more involvement with that. But I run into residents all the time. I'm out and about. I have a dog, so we walk all over the place, and that's how I really get to know the neighbors and get to know the community. But I've mentioned it before, coming to the meetings, that is critical. And also using the tools that we have available. We now have this great hub to submit feedback so that we can all see it. Those would be the ways that I would encourage homeowners to get involved. But I do think face-to-face interaction. We also have the events for new homeowners. And I think it's important to meet with those new homeowners when they're first coming in so that they can get integrated right from the beginning and understand how our community works and who their representatives are. So I would myself start to attend some of those sessions, even though I think Merrill hosts most of them, but coming to those sessions and being visible is a way to interact with the community.
Any more questions? Oh, Mike.
I'm getting the sense he doesn't want me on the board anymore. I'm a walker, and most of my knowledge has come during my walks, which normally it takes about 15 minutes to walk a circle. That walk can sometimes take an hour and a half, depending on who's out walking their dogs. So it's a great learning experience. And one thing, probably a perfect example of that, the demographics in our community has changed dramatically. It's become a lot younger. Actually, everybody's younger, but it's become a lot younger. And I got to talking with one of the young mothers in the town, in the town, and heard about all of the youngsters we have here now who are getting on the bus. And just offhandedly at one meeting at the board, I just brought up the subject, our demographics are changing. We have a lot of youngsters, a lot of young people. Maybe we as a board can do something to work cooperatively and find a way of maybe offering some daycare to these youngsters. I see them coming off the bus in the afternoon, wandering around. That's the type of thing that I pick up on my walks. And it is the person to person.
Every get to ask?
Did.
Yes. Any other? Yes, Charlie.
Hi, Charlie.
Stern.
Thank you. Thank you all for being here. Charlie Bartolotta, Marina Bay, been here 3 years. Without shaping the question or the answer in too many ways, how do you all feel about the opportunities prospectively once Ocean Atlantic is out of the board, at least as a majority stakeholder, for the homeowners to coalesce and become more of an advocate in certain things related to the club prospectively? We all know the bylaws or the membership agreement and the guidelines associated with that, but that's the other big half of our life here, the club. So I'm just curious how you all feel about prospectively the relationship with the club and what we can do to be a voice for positive.
Certainly plan to maintain the positive relationship that has been established.
We can't hear you. I don't know what's going on.
We can't hear you in the meeting.
Hang on a second. Use this.
To start. That again, that's like being home. Charlie, you got the sense. Basically, in the 10 words or less, I quit. No, we have a wonderful cooperative collective relationship with Ocean Atlantic. And that's the way we should try and work with them so that everybody's a winner and we don't end up confrontationally.
You know, I think the key to this is access, right? So who do we have access to? We will always have access to Ocean Atlantic because they're going to be part of our board, even if it's just one seat. We live together in this community behind the gate. Our success is their success and vice versa. I know it's a question that I asked Meryl when the board interviewed me to begin with. And like Meryl said, they're going to make money, right? I mean, that's just like, because our concern is that they're healthy, that they're financially healthy, that all of the services remain because it has a direct impact on the value of our property and obviously the resort community style that I've become accustomed to living here. But it's about access. I mean, Jessica noted the advisory meeting. I know sitting at the, I belong to the PLGA and sitting with the ladies last week, I know that they're involved in the golf piece and their voices are heard and part of that. So Neil is there. We have access to him. So access is important. But I also think that as we go out in the community that we don't draw a wall between the questions or concerns, because bringing those back for you and speaking on your behalf and bringing those back, you know, noting those, looking at themes becomes important.
It looks cute.
I can't imagine that Ocean Atlantic is not interested in what the people who are utilizing the facilities on a daily basis have to say. I know it almost goes to the renter question as well, right? So, because I think there's some thoughts around renters and the renters using the facility. So all of that, I think, can come back because we have access to those people.
Anyone else? You have to use this microphone. Yeah, but this is for the people on the call.
Okay. Joan Orcutt, 18th on the Bay. We settled just about 2 years ago on our home and we're full-time happy residents. My question to the board is, several of you have mentioned community associations for different neighborhoods. 18th on the Bay is like the lost stepchild. We don't have a wall. Every other community in the neighborhood has a wall. Even Stillwater, which is newer than us, has a wall, but you don't see us because you go through Marina Bay. So sometimes we just feel like we're kind of forgotten. And perfect example, we had an issue with the, I don't know what you call that, black fabric-y fence they put up, silt fence. That stuff was there almost 2 years after we settled between the golf cart path, the grass, and our homes. And nobody seemed to want to address it. And I wonder, because we don't have a community association, we wrote a group letter to Shell, to OA, and I think maybe to the board, the PCA, Lisa. Anyway, we sent it out to everybody we could think of to say, who was going to remove this? It looked like, pardon the French, poo-poo caca. And the golfers are driving by this, and every once in a while, Spazzato would come and plow it all down so it would look good for a tournament, but it still grew up and it was a hot mess. Finally, after contacting them several times, we still didn't hear anything back. And all of a sudden they just show up. And it's like, why weren't they communicating with us? They didn't have the courtesy to respond to our letters. And I just wonder if because we don't have a neighborhood separate HOA, are we at a disadvantage than other communities? And how do we address that as the stepchild of the neighborhood?
What do you want to answer?
Who's first?
It doesn't matter. So I think it's an important distinction to make that the PCA, where it comes to governance, that's the ultimate authority. So if you have well, I think it's important to make sure that the sub-associations are involved because that's a good way to get feedback from the community. The PCA, that's where you need to go. So if you have a concern as a resident, use the voice that you have through the PCA to make those changes. And I mean, that's what you need to contact the PCA. Having a separate association does not change that. I can tell you from firsthand experience. We make our decisions on a very limited basis, but the PCA makes the decisions and maintains all of the property throughout the community, whether there's a sub-association or not. So if you have a concern, it should go to the office.
I mean, I've got a little bit of knowledge here. So, this was part of the catalyst of me wanting to be on the board, because what happened is I think it was a congregation of multiple people who thought they owned or others owned, a lot of finger pointing this way, like this, to get that done. So again, there are 6 communities, sub-communities, sub-neighborhoods in the community that the PCA is their dominant board, right? That we don't have. So we've talked about this, I think, we've got to have, and I know we've elected Paul as our mayor. So sort of an unofficial voting. But it's like, how do we find people to represent those communities? And again, if we're out in front of those communities and speaking to those communities, we're going to get some of that to bring that back more formally to the board. One of the things that also we didn't get, which was a catalyst, is communication back. No one ever called us. No one ever told us what's going on. The same thing is going on with parking in that neighborhood. And again, we may not like the answer, but we need an answer. And so that's my goal, is that you will have an answer. We will get together and we will figure it out and you will get the answer. It may not be the answer you like or the answer you want, but we will know now what the deal is. And so that's part of the catalyst of me wanting to be on the board, is to be able to figure that out for neighborhoods.
You were caught in a loop. You were caught in a loop. And that loop was determining who owned that land. Was it PCA land or golf course land? That tends to get all kinds of fuzzy. As it turned out, that was golf course land. And that's why all of a sudden something arrived and it was cleaned out. All I can say in retrospect is that I have publicized my email address. I have reached out to people and have been accessible to them. And that's my role as a board member, to be that intermediary if there is that loop. And unfortunately, in our community, we have lots of areas which nobody knows who owns it. That's my role. That has been my role. That will continue to be my role when I continue on the board.
Question about the identity of the Bay. Is it unique and distinct, or is it part of Marina Bay?
It's
unique. We are our own neighbor. We are a neighbor.
Quite frankly, Marina Bay Custom Homes. Marina Bay Custom Homes are free and independent homes. They do not have a representative. They do not have a community organization.
It's not Marina Bay, it's 18th on the Bay. 18th on the Bay Custom Homes, 18th on the Bay Townhomes, and then 18th on the Bay Condos has their condo association. But we as townhomes or custom homes don't have representatives.
You don't. It's very similar to the Marina Bay Custom Homes.
Celia?
Hi, I'm Celia Oftenberg, and I live in the Conservancy for the last 8 years. So we're touching on this in the last few questions about the neighborhood associations. I've been very surprised that the PCA board does not really acknowledge or consult with or share communications with the neighborhood associations, that we're not viewed as an ancillary arm of the PCA in some ways, because we represent some of the communities, the neighborhoods here. So I'd like to hear from each of you how you are going to improve that communication and the utilization of the neighborhood boards as input and as in a collaborative and cooperative way to work with us. I mean, we're not even consulted at times when PCA and committees make decisions about our neighborhoods, things that are going on in our neighborhoods because they're on common land or PCA land. And I'd like to see that change, because I think that we view ourselves as a piece of the big puzzle. So I'd like to hear from each of you how you're going to change that and improve that communication.
Thanks. Whose turn? Do you care?
I mean, it's one of the things, again, it's the catalyst for me being here. One of the cool things, and I've spent some time looking at the archives that have now been put up on there, is one of the incredible things is when, if all of you have read that, or if you haven't, I mean, I absolutely would encourage you to, is the way that the people within this community came together and the homeowners association people came together to get things done at a time, at a time that was incredibly critical for this, for the fact that we still live here today. I mean, we wouldn't be here if they wouldn't have. So I agree with you. I think there's got to be a way that the homeowners associations come together, but also with representatives from those added 6 communities that don't have a homeowners association, but that choose somebody to represent them. I know we've done that, just again, weirdly enough, but how do we hear your voice collectively, not only in neighborhood meetings that we can have, but also through you and what you're dealing with in your communities? Again, I found out through 16 floors of a building that people have very different experiences depending on the floor they live in. It's the same thing here. So my commitment would absolutely be to find a way to bring you together and hear your voice collectively. What are the themes? There have to be some, but what are those unique things that need to be addressed?
And I think I've touched on this a couple of times, but I mean, I would even advocate for quarterly meetings. That may not happen immediately, but I do think it's important. There is some self-governance there. It's a very delicate, complicated relationship in terms of the governance with the sub-associations and the PCA. But I do think it's important to meet with that leadership and have regular meetings with them, be it the entire board or the presidents, however that looks, but have a separate meeting. And I mean, if that's my time, I'm happy to do it. And I think now we still communicate with some of the other leaders and, share ideas and bounce things off of each other, ask what their challenges are. Cause I think, we all have different challenges right now. Being a condo association, I can tell you firsthand, you have a lot of challenges right now. I think it's important to have regular meetings, the PCA board to have members to have regular meetings with those associations.
I know I have been invited to, and I have attended some of the community quarterly meetings. I have also reached out to some of the communities and said, I'd like to attend one of your meetings. And they said, well, we really don't need you. So the effort is there, Celia, and you're aware that when there have been some conflicting issues, the board's been there, the ARC has been there, the other committees have been there to try and work through any pending issues. Who takes the initiative? The community or the board or the community? That's a continuing relationship that we keep working on. Is it going to be perfect? Probably not. Will there be conflicts? Probably. But I know I have always been open and responded when approached. And I have taken the initiative when I felt it was appropriate and sometimes rejected. So the effort's there. It's just making it mesh.
All right, I think we're going to cut it off. I've been told by my boss here that we had enough. I want to thank the candidates. I think you're all very qualified. You did a great job.